No one dared speak of it. Not in the halls of the longhouses, not in whispered legends passed down through generations. The rituals of Viking brides were hidden behind layers of secrecy, terrifying punishments for disobedience, forbidden acts of devotion, and dark traditions that history erased. Yet one young woman's story survived, whispering the truth of a world no one wanted you to see. She arrived at the village on the eve of her wedding, her beauty already sparking envy and whispers. Marriage among the Vikings was no union of love. It was a crucible of obedience, loyalty, and survival. Any misstep could summon punishment so cruel that even the bravest warriors turned pale. Legends spoke of brides who vanished in the night, carried away under the guise of rituals, or returned broken, marked with symbols that burned like fire into their skin. The elders whispered of the rite of shadows, a ceremony cloaked in secrecy, known only to those enforcing the laws of the Longhouse. On that chilling evening, shadows stretched across the cobblestones like spectres. The village held its breath. Smoke curled from hearths mixing with the icy wind, as if the night itself was watching. Every eye was on the bride, yet no one spoke. Even the children sensed the air was heavy with secrets that could haunt a soul forever. She remembered her mother's warning. The ways of the brides are not for gentle hearts. Obey or vanish into the darkness where none may follow. Obedience was a lie when the rules were carved from fear and ancient injustice. Each step toward the altar felt heavier than the last, burdened with expectation and shadows of untold horrors. The first test began, a gesture of loyalty, a display of grace. Misstep, hesitation, or doubt could summon punishment. A cruel mark, a humiliating spectacle, or worse. Marriage was endurance, survival. Every eye was a judge. Candles flickered, casting grotesque shadows that twisted like spirits around the walls. Centuries of expectation pressed down on her, the voices of women who had walked this path before woven into the stones. Tonight, she would confront the hidden truths of Viking love and marriage, a world where devotion was demanded, obedience enforced, and any glimpse of independence could be fatal. Her breath caught as the ritual began, and the air thickened with centuries of secrets. Every movement, every glance, every heartbeat mattered. Somewhere deep within her, a spark of courage flickered. The same spark that had survived centuries of fear, cruelty, and injustice. This was the night when history would either erase her, or her story would survive to whisper its truth. The morning after her arrival, the village seemed deceptively calm. Mist curled over the fjord like a living thing, and the frozen earth glistened under a pale sun. Yet beneath this quiet tension simmered. The longhouse doors, massive slabs of oak reinforced with iron, groaned as they shifted in the wind. Every creak, every whisper of movement carried weight. The villagers, both young and old, watched her with guarded curiosity. Eyes followed her from the marketplace to the riverbank, from the granaries to the hearths. She was no ordinary girl. Her presence had unsettled the delicate balance of tradition and fear that bound this settlement. Her name had already spread among the clans. Some envied her beauty, others feared her presence, while a few murmured prayers that the gods would protect her from the unseen forces that governed the lives of Viking brides. For in this land, marriage was not merely a social contract. It was a crucible that tested obedience, endurance, and loyalty. One misstep, one flicker of disobedience, could summon consequences so brutal that even the strongest warriors faltered in remembrance. She walked among the longhouses, the cold wind biting her cheeks. The villagers, clad in furs and leather, carried on with their daily chores, yet every glance toward her betrayed a story of caution. The blacksmith's hammer rang out against iron, a rhythmic pulse echoing through the settlement. The sound was comforting, yet it reminded her of the ever-present expectation. She must endure, she must obey, and she must survive. Her room in the longhouse was sparse, furnished only with a bed of straw, a small wooden chest, and a candle holder. The walls bore carvings of ancient gods and symbols, whose meanings had been lost to most, yet whose presence conveyed authority and judgment. She traced her fingers along these carvings, feeling the weight of generations pressing down. Every mark was a reminder. The women before her had walked this path, and most had not survived the trials intact. Outside, the children played near the frozen river, oblivious to the unseen rituals that shaped their world. Yet even their laughter carried a subtle fear, a recognition that their elders' lives were bound by rules they could not fully comprehend. She observed them, longing for the innocence they still possessed, yet knowing it would be stripped from her in due course. The first ritual loomed ahead, and with it the knowledge that failure was not an option. The village elders were already gathering in the central hall, a space both revered and feared. The fire roared in the hearth, casting flickering shadows across the wooden walls. Each shadow seemed to breathe, moving with a life of its own. The elders' faces were stern, carved with lines that spoke of wisdom, cruelty, and a strict adherence to tradition. They were the arbiters of obedience, the keepers of rules both sacred and terrifying. Their gazes followed her every movement as she entered the hall, each step echoing like a drumbeat of destiny. She could feel the eyes of the other brides upon her, their expressions a mixture of pity, envy, and silent warning. Some had already endured part of the rite of shadows, their faces marked with symbols of obedience and submission. Others whispered of brides who had been punished, stories that were never spoken aloud in the longhouse, but whose lessons were carved into every stone and timber. Her heart raced. Survival meant more than endurance. It demanded strategy, intuition, and courage. In the hours that followed, she was introduced to the traditions she would soon be tested against. Each task, each expectation was layered with meaning, a reflection of a society that demanded perfection, loyalty, and silence. She learned that obedience was not enough. One had to anticipate, to read the subtle currents of power that flowed beneath the surface. Every glance from an elder, every word, every gesture carried hidden weight. Failure could be punished in ways that history would not record, ways so secret that even whispers could not escape the longhouse walls. The food she ate was simple: dried fish, coarse bread, and salted meat. Yet even this sustenance carried a lesson. Meals were not merely nourishment. They were a reflection of status, obedience, and the ability to conform. Sharing or even showing preference could mark her as defiant. She observed carefully, noting who received more, who was overlooked, and how the elders measured each bride's behavior in silent, exacting ways. By evening, the first warnings of the coming trials were evident. The women who had endured part of the rituals bore subtle scars, not all visible but all permanent. Their eyes carried the weight of experiences that the village preferred to erase. She watched them, learning silently, understanding that knowledge was as vital as courage. To survive, she would need to internalize every unspoken rule, anticipate every expectation, and remain vigilant against the subtle traps laid by centuries of tradition. As night fell, the longhouse transformed. The firelight danced across the walls, creating grotesque shadows that seemed to move with intention. The villagers retired, yet the elders remained, preparing for the ceremonies that would begin with the rising sun. The bride lay awake on her straw bed, her mind racing with fear, anticipation, and determination. Outside, the wind howled, carrying with it the whispers of women long gone, their stories etched into the stones, timber, and cold air. She understood now survival would not be simple. The coming days would test every part of her, body, mind, and spirit. Yet beneath the fear, a spark of determination glimmered. The shadows of the longhouse held secrets, yes, but they also held a path forward. If she could navigate the rituals, if she could endure the trials, her story might not be erased. Her courage, cunning, and resilience could carve her place in the annals of history, even in a world that sought to forget her. And so, as the first light of dawn brushed the horizon, she rose, ready to face the unknown. The village was silent, yet it seemed to breathe around her, alive with expectation, fear, and the weight of tradition. The young bride took her first steps toward a fate shrouded in secrecy and danger, her heart steady, despite the shadows that loomed. The story of the Viking brides was not just a tale of obedience and cruelty. It was a crucible of endurance, a test of spirit, and a journey through the hidden truths of a society that demanded perfection. Every shadow, every glance, every ritual would teach her, and perhaps in surviving, she might also teach the world the stories it had tried to erase. The days that followed tested her beyond fear. Every ritual, every glance from the elders carried hidden threats. Brides vanished in silence, their fates whispered only in shadows. She navigated the trials with trembling courage, learning the brutal language of obedience, punishment, and survival. Secrets of loyalty and betrayal unfolded with each task. A single misstep could erase her from memory. Yet beneath terror, defiance flickered, a spark that refused to be extinguished. She watched, learned, adapted, and endured. Every shadow hid danger. Every smile could deceive. The young bride realized surviving meant mastering the cruel dance of tradition, or being consumed by it. The night of the ultimate ritual arrived, cloaked in shadows deeper than any she had faced. The longhouse seemed alive, every creak of timber and flicker of fire casting grotesque shapes across the walls. The elders gathered, their faces carved with authority and expectation, eyes gleaming with the weight of centuries. Every bride who had come before whispered through the stones, their silenced voices pressing down on her. The tasks escalated beyond endurance, each challenge more cruel, more demanding, more impossible. She was forced to prove loyalty through acts that twisted devotion into horror. The line between obedience and defiance blurred with every heartbeat. A slip, a hesitation, a glance away, and she would be marked, erased, or worse. Shadows of other brides loomed around her, some visible, some only in memory, their suffering a warning etched into her mind. The cold firelight revealed every subtle movement of the elders, every unspoken rule, every trap laid to catch the unwary. Fear clawed at her, threatening to consume her, yet within that terror a spark of defiance burned brighter. She confronted the final test, a ritual designed to shatter the spirit and claim submission. Her body shook, her mind screamed, yet she refused to yield completely. Every instinct, every learned gesture, every stolen piece of wisdom from the women before her converged in a delicate dance of survival. The elders watched, eyes narrowing, sensing the unusual strength in her resolve. For a moment, time seemed suspended. Every shadow, every breath, every heartbeat amplified the tension until it became unbearable. And then, with a courage born from desperation and defiance, she made a choice that no one had anticipated. The ritual faltered, the elders hesitated, the longhouse trembled with the uncertainty of a tradition challenged. In that instant she claimed her presence. The fear that had once weighed like chains lifted slightly, replaced with a realization. Survival did not mean submission alone. It meant mastering the rules while bending them, finding strength in the cracks of cruelty, and allowing defiance to shine without annihilation. The whispers of erased brides seemed to acknowledge her, their shadows lending her courage. By the end of the night she stood alive, trembling yet unbroken, marked but undefeated. History had tried to erase her, as it had erased countless others, yet she remained. The rituals had been endured, the cruelty survived, and in that survival lay a victory more profound than mere obedience. A spark of change flickered in the darkness, hinting that even in a world built on fear, courage could endure and stories could survive, ready to whisper their truths to those who dared to listen. The first light of dawn broke through the longhouse windows, casting pale beams across the trembling faces of the villagers. Silence hung thick in the air, heavier than any fear she had known. The rituals were complete, the elders subdued not by force but by the quiet strength of her survival. She stood marked, weary and scarred, yet unbroken, a testament to endurance and defiance in a world built on fear. The other brides looked at her with awe and hesitation. Some recognized in her the courage they had long suppressed. Others saw the reflection of their own survival struggles. For the first time, the rigid lines of obedience were blurred. The longhouse, once a prison of tradition, seemed momentarily suspended in recognition of a power that could not be erased, the human spirit. Her body bore the symbols of the trials, etched into skin and memory alike. But it was not these marks that defined her. It was the spark within that refused to be extinguished, the subtle defiance that allowed her to navigate cruelty and survive with dignity intact. Even the elders, embodiments of centuries of control, seemed to acknowledge that the young bride had transcended the rituals, bending them with intellect and courage without shattering entirely. Outside, the village carried on its routines, unaware of the transformation that had silently occurred within the longhouse. Yet beneath the calm, whispers spread of a bride who had faced the darkest traditions and emerged alive, unbroken, and strangely liberated. The story would circulate quietly among the women, teaching them that endurance could coexist with defiance, and obedience could be tempered by intelligence and courage. In the days that followed, she moved through the village with a new awareness. Every glance, every gesture, every whispered conversation reminded her that she had survived what history had tried to erase. And in that survival lay a lesson far beyond the confines of marriage or ritual, that courage is forged not by the absence of fear, but by the will to act despite it, that justice can exist even in systems built to deny it, and that the echoes of defiance, can reverberate through generations. The shadows of the Longhouse no longer threatened her. They whispered of endurance, legacy, and untold stories. She had faced cruelty, injustice, and the weight of tradition, and yet she remained. History could attempt to erase her, as it had erased countless others, but she had claimed her place, even if only as a quiet witness to the truths of her time. And as she looked out over the fjord, the rising sun glinting off the icy water, one thought lingered. What other stories lie hidden in the shadows of the Longhouses, waiting for someone brave enough to survive and whisper their truths to the world?